Good morning and welcome. I am Pamela Ramcharan and I will be your host for this episode of our public education series on the Caribbean Parenting Digital Show. Of course, this morning we will be discussing World Mental Health Day rather, and of course that is an observance on October 10th every year, and it aims to raise awareness of mental health issues around the world and mobilize efforts in support of mental health. And here's a fact about mental health from the World Health Organization. Around 1 in 5 of the world's children and adolescents have a mental disorder. And today's discussion is meant to help us understand mental health and its impact on children and also how it can be treated. Now, let's discuss this further as we welcome Nalini Rampersad, who is a school social worker, and she has held that position for the last 12 years. She is also a wife and a mother, and she shares the same concerns as it relates to mental health and children. Nalini, we say thank you for taking time out of your day to join us this morning.
Hi, good morning. Thank you so much for having me.
It is indeed a pleasure. And, we're going to go right into the discussion as we speak about World Mental Health Day. And just for our viewers, Ms. Rampersad, can you define mental health for us?
Sure. The theme for this year's mental health is mental health for all. And the celebration is basically asking the authorities nationwide to take action in terms of creating lasting change within the mental health system. Because what we have noticed, particularly, especially in our island, there is a stigmatization against mental health. And persons who are in need of help or they have certain issues, they would be like, the parents would look at them and be like, this child is just misbehaved or is obia, or, they don't understand really what mental health is. So a definition of mental health can be mental health refers to one's emotional well-being with the absence of mental illness. Your mental health allows you to enjoy life, creates a balance between activities and your efforts, with the outcome of psychological resilience. Now, psychological resilience speaks to the fact of you coping with a crisis and moving from that crisis, that pre-crisis state, quickly and return to a pre-crisis state quickly. So there's that moment of crisis, and then you move from that area quickly, remaining calm and without a negative consequence. Can I give you a quick example of that? Let's just say a child in class, a Monday morning, the child comes to school with the expectation of just carrying out a normal day. The teacher comes and says, let's have a pop quiz. So the child automatically feels heart racing, beads of sweat start to come out from the child's forehead, their sweaty palms, and the child's ability now to move from that crisis or chaos into a state where they can actually function and use all the information that was taught before for this pop quiz will show the child's ability in terms of psychological resilience.
All right, I thank you for that. We appreciate how you use that example to make it so practical so that we are better able to understand, because we hear mental health all the time, not truly understanding what mental health really means. And even as we continue our discussion, we want to just get into, can you give us what are some mental health challenges with regards to children and some of those things that they would face?
Okay, well, some of the top, there are a couple challenges that these students face in general. So the first one is anxiety disorders, and then there's ADHD, autism spectrum disorder, eating disorders, depression and mood disorders, post-traumatic stress disorders, and schizophrenia. They are the number one challenges that we have found facing our young persons, from toddlers to adolescents, and sometimes it even goes towards adulthood. Now, anxiety disorder can be classified as a group of mental disorders characterized by a significant feeling of anxiety or fear. Anxiety is a worry about the future events, while fear is a reaction to current events. ADHD, or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, is a brain disorder that affects how you pay attention, the way you sit still or not, controlling your behavior. ADHD can grow from early childhood to adolescence, and it can even go to adulthood. Disorder amongst children. There is autism spectrum disorder, and this is a developmental disorder that affects communication and behavior. It can be diagnosed at any age, but normally we would find around the age 2 is where autism spectrum disorder normally sets in.
All
Now we
right.
have schizophrenia. I just want to just go into just one more because these are it is so popular amongst our young people. Now, schizophrenia is usually the symptoms. There are symptoms of schizophrenia. There are delusions, hallucination, and disorganized speech and catatonic behaviors. And Pamela, these are they normally diagnosed amongst our children in our population today.
All right. And you see, the thing is there with your explanation, because you hear people saying mental health and they just think mental health in terms of maybe they may consider somebody to be acting all crazy. But there are a list of things based on what you have just explained
Mhm.
that can be considered or categorized under mental health, where you explain the ADHD and so on. And I mean, that is something very important, I think, for parents to be aware of, because even for us as well, for me, I can say it's an education series, and I am also learning,
Mhm.
because you would have that thinking of what it is really,
Mhm.
and we are so far off in terms of
Yes.
mental health and what we think that it is. And I want you to just expound just a little bit. You listed about 5 disorders there, and the
Yes.
first one I believe had to do with anxiety. If
Yes.
you could just expound a little bit on that disorder.
Sure. Well, you know what? May I just say, just for the moment, though, really is one of the most prominent amongst our young persons, and there are, but as this is an information setting, and for parents and all the persons that who would be on this platform, I would like them to know that there are red flags. There are certain things that we call red flags in which to look for, because you're not going to say because just a child has a bit of a little emotional instability because of exams or otherwise that the child has a mental health challenge. However, though, there are particular red flags that we would look for. And when we speak about anxiety, anxiety is a disorder, as we said, characterized by significant feelings of fear. Now, anxiety can be very crippling, Pamela. It can be very, very crippling. We have seen students not being able to write exams. We have been seeing children not being able to do anything at all, that they will just get so scared and they will go into a corner, they will go under the bed. And if you ask them what is happening, they themselves don't even understand what is happening. But it's a serious rush of fear. It is a crippling, anxiety is really, really crippling, and it needs assistance and it needs to be treated with.
All right. And even as we talk about the treatment aspect of it, we will take a short break at this point as we hear from our sponsor. And even as we continue our conversation, Nalini, you spoke
Yes.
about those red flags. How can
Hmm.
parents identify mental health challenges among children?
Okay. Well, seeing that we are in this global crisis, the pandemic that we are facing, we would find that families, the situation has changed, the dynamics of the family has changed, where we will be spending more time with each other. And this is a time where bonds can be built at home. And parents can take a significant look in terms of what is happening with their children, because we know sometimes work would otherwise, inhibit some of these things. Now, some of the things I would ask parents to look for are significant changes in behavior. First of all, withdrawal. Withdrawal from family get together gatherings. You would find them spending more times in their rooms. You would find them spending more time, especially with boys. I would note, especially with boys, they play hours and hours on end with their phones. They would be in that period where they would go online and they would play games, and they would play for sometimes to 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. Parents can pay attention to their children, because we have a significant increase in cutting on self-harm behaviors, where children they would have learned, and most of the cases that I would have treated with when it comes to self-harm and cutting, it would be behaviors that they mimicked. It was not because of a deep psychological issue, but they were taught via media how to deal with stress and how to deal with issues at home. So parents can pay attention to your children's skin, look out for marks that keeps reoccurring. Recognize if your child, when we were talking about withdrawal earlier and isolation, look for signs where they speak about death. There is no goal setting. There is no happiness. There's no move towards the future. There's no futuristic talk amongst them. These are some significant red flags. And another thing though is hygiene. Young people normally we have to be behind them to clean their rooms, yes? But when we speak about hygiene, you will see that there's honestly no upkeep when it comes to their personal health. They really don't care to brush their teeth, even combing their hair seems to become a serious challenge. And I, this is a significant red flag for parents. When children, they do not want to get out of bed, there is no zeal to get out of bed, there is no zeal to speak to family, and they are not personally taking care of themselves. And if you look in their rooms, you will see that they have not changed sheets or towels, their bathrooms may not have been clean, you know. Um, Another thing is though, what we have been having and a lot of issues is drug use amongst our teens also, because we would have touched a little bit on self-harm, where we would ask parents to look at their children's skin, especially these areas, yes, and their legs. Also, I would like parents to really, and I would just use some local parlance. These students like to say, oh, you're like a macawi business, or you're always obstinary business, or like I stay out of the place, give us some time. But when parents have that moment and they can go and check around their rooms, this have been something. This is a bottle of cough medicine, cough syrup. And I'm so happy that I have the opportunity to speak to you all today, because mental health issues, children who do not understand that they can cope, or there are ways and means of coping, they turn to drugs and drug use. And there's a wide availability of drugs that they can use. And a lot of the main choice right now is this cough syrup. If parents have been noticing a lot of these bottles in their children's room, you need to ask for help. You seriously need to ask for help, because this distorts the mind of the children. It causes erratic behavior. It causes bouts of paranoia. It causes the child can always be agitated. And the thing is, when they use the cough syrup, you really can't see. Not like if they consume other drugs, for example, marijuana, we use the dilated pupils and the redness of the eyes. There is no sign except for the change in behavior.
All right. And Nalini, as you spoke about that, and as I'm listening to you, it also speaks to parents really paying attention to what
Yes,
is going on with their children, and
yes,
really being aware of what is happening in their lives,
yes,
spending time thinking that it is okay to be on their computer playing games. It's all right to be up and waking until the wee hours of the morning.
yes,
But
correct.
based on what you're saying there, these are things that really parents need to look out for. Is that right?
Mm. Yes, seriously, because many of these things would pass by because of our busyness. And supervision, I cannot specify enough or reiterate enough on supervision and relationship with your children. Earning the mighty dollar is important. We understand this. But you must have a relationship with your child, because this is what will create that psychological resilience to bounce them from crisis and chaos back into normalcy. We must pay particular attention to our young people, because our young people have been more exposed than any other generation to information. Their ability to dissect and sift the information positively could always be skewed, because their influence and their peer group and peer relation also affects the way that they would, the things that they would gravitate to on media. Because as I would just go back to the point when I spoke about cutting, most of the cutting cases, most of the self-harm cases was a learned behavior from a friend. They were taught that if you have an issue and your mom quarrels with you, or your mom takes the phone away from you, you could go and cut, because that is the way to relieve your stress. So paying attention, family relationship and attention, setting boundaries, giving your child a boundary. I have noticed that parents in this point in time, parents really don't understand how to guide their children, because they are accustomed with the child being in school within a formative state. Now the child is at home and learning. So there are the questions of how do I set boundaries and how do I set guidelines. But we must find something that works for you and works for your family. Each house is different, each situation is different. Find what works for you. Get your child into a routine. Give them rules, give them boundaries, give them limitations. And please, if you have to work and there is supervision from the another area or another person, please be very careful who you expose your child to.
Wow. And I mean, I pray that those that are listening, that are viewing, parents, moms, and dads, are taking note of what Nalini is speaking about today, because it is very important, mental health, and it does affect children. And, even as we continue our discussion, Nalini, I
Mhm.
just want to mental health opportunities for intervention, because we spoke about some of the things that parents can do, but what opportunities are there for intervention in
Okay,
terms of
so
different bodies and so on, whether it's governmental, whether it's NGOs and things like that?
okay, so well, first of all, we could start. Well, children, we know they spend most of their times at home, at school, and probably in a religious organization, yes? So the red flags that we would have noted before, when they are recognized either by the teachers or or particulars in school, there are the school social workers, there are the guidance officers that the teacher can speak with and say, I have been recognizing that A has not been participating in class, or B is coming to school with dirty clothes. And what that teacher will do is we'll speak to the social worker or the guidance officer, and we do something called a referral, in which we would start to conduct an assessment. Now, with that assessment, the assessment goes in stages. There are things that we as social workers we deal with, like self-harm and depression and certain, eating and drug situations. However, if we do find that this case is beyond our help, we make a further referral to the medical aspect. And each healthcare system, in terms of the general hospitals throughout Trinidad and Tobago, there are psychologists and there are psychiatrists, various days, various persons, different days, different places, sorry. And we make that referral for that deeper level intervention. And they now can either assess if this child needs to be placed in a drug program, which is also offered in the medical system, or they need a psychologist or psychiatric help, and they will do their further interventions. We also have a child guidance clinic located in Port of Spain and Pleasantville, where interventions are also done.
All right. And you spoke about the assessments being done by the social worker or the guidance officer, or even if the teacher recognizes a student may be having some of those issues and referring it. In terms of the parents themselves, if they recognize those red flags, is the avenue of approaching social workers and guidance officer, is it available for them?
Yes. What I fail to say is that anyone can refer. Anyone that recognizes there's an issue and needs help, they can refer. They can come into the school, they can speak to the teacher, or they can come and speak to the guidance officer or the social worker and say, here's what my child needs help. I'm recognizing some things here and I don't know how to handle it and I need some help.
All right. And, even at this time, we continue our conversation on World Mental Health Day, talking about mental health and the child. And you would have spoken at length about the parents paying attention to what their child is doing, what is
Mhm.
happening, the time that they're spending, the things that they may have withdrawn from. Now, and I want to ask this question, Nalini, when it comes to parents, and, do you believe they are sometimes, or our parents sometimes, a contributing factor to some of these mental health issues with children? And, based on your answer, I would like for you to explain your answer, if possible.
Sure. And that's actually an excellent question because I like to use real life situation. I have a poor example. I was asked just an impromptu because they didn't know I was coming to the school that day and there was a parent day for the form trees and I was asked to deliver. I had a couple of form trees in the office and I was like, girls, what you would like me to tell your parents? And some of the things that they said is that when you all are having your arguments, please don't let the entire household be involved. You can argue, you can have your little tit for tat, but it must not always affect the entire household because parents tend to broadcast, especially in cases of domestic violence and verbal abuses. That's and that could go within the sexes. Right? There's no generalization there, but that could go within the sexes, and they could just be so flamboyant about the way they will put down another spouse. Sorry, and when they do that, the children they are so stressed. They come to school stressed, and they lack the ability to even function at school. Some of the students says that when they make mistakes, which our young people do, they ask parents to forgive them. They ask for forgiveness. And they say most of the times, miss, when we ask our parents for forgiveness, they say that they forgive us. And every half an hour or every moment and every opportunity that arises, they will continue to throw that back in their faces. So they do not feel that forgiveness has taken place. So the child feels that, what, the plate that they just had washed off asking for forgiveness, the parent comes back now and dirties that plate. They come and they pile up a set of stuff over it, and the child does not seem to get over the fact that, and they continuously feel guilty. They continuously feeling wrong. They also ask that parents, when something happens in the home with your child, please keep the child's business to yourself. Stop broadcasting the child's business to the next cousin or the aunt or the this one and the that one. I had an occurrence yesterday, and there was a particular incident that happened with a child, and it was very much embarrassing and humiliating. And the parent kept it, she didn't keep it within herself. She told the family. And when the child went into the family to visit the grandparents, everybody was like, well, I hear so and so happened to you. And the child felt so humiliated. So we need to remember, if we are asking for help, who do we ask for help? Be very careful who you share the child's information with, because just like ourselves, we like privacy and confidentiality, and we must give that respect back. And another prominent thing that happens when children have younger siblings, and we speak about sibling rivalry, I would like parents to let their children know, and you need to speak with them. You might think that they might know, but they really don't. They need to remember that they are loved also. They are in a position where you don't have to cuddle them, you don't have to speak to them or continuously, gauge them about rules and particulars, but you love them anyway. they will see you spending more time with the toddler or the baby because this child requires more at this point in time of you. But that does not mean that you are not loved and you are not cherished and you are not pushed aside because we have a new member of the household and they are now forgotten.
Oh, and indeed, what an insightful conversation, Nalini. And even as we get into just about wrapping up shortly, I want, to just get your final thoughts. Of course, the topic today of discussion, World Mental Health Day, mental health and the child. What are your final thoughts? What would you say to parents, those that are viewing our segment here?
Well, to be quite honest, mental health is really a serious issue, and I would try to do this very quickly. When I was attending senior sec, I was about 14 to 15. I had some serious issues. I fell into a state of depression, and because my mom was diagnosed schizophrenic, and back in those days there was no one for me to speak to. So I would like to let our young persons know, and it affected me academically because when I wrote my 7 subjects, I only passed 4. And I only passed because of the information that I had in my head. I did not have the ability to cope. And there was nobody for me to speak to because I grew up as an only child. And there was nobody who understood because my mom was diagnosed schizophrenic and nobody understood. And schizophrenia is a crippling, disease. So I would like to say please remove the barriers when it comes to counseling. Getting counseling and asking for help does not mean that you're not capable. It does not mean like to use the term mad. The child is not mad. The child is just having an issue and they need some type of assistance. And parents, please do not be afraid to ask for help. Ask for help. Ask for help from trustworthy persons. It is very, very important because we will help our children grow and not put them in a position where it will inevitably be crippling for them.
Right. And, I think that's a very good note where we can end and wrap up this segment. Ask for help
Yes.
because there is help that is
Yeah.
available to deal with
Mm-hmm.
mental health issues. So I want to just take this time now to thank you for taking time to join us for our public education series on the Caribbean Parenting Digital Show. Thank you so much, Miss Rampersad. Remember, Caribbean Parenting Digital Show as a bi-weekly talk show. It is streamed digitally each Wednesday and Sunday right here on this channel. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share. We appreciate that you've tuned in for this episode of the Caribbean Parenting Digital Show and trust that you are now better equipped as a parent to support your children and, by extension, your family unit based on the information shared. Now, you can join us again at 12:30 p.m. as we continue this public education series on World Mental Health Day. We will be discussing mental health and teens. I am Pamela Ramcharan, and until next time, take care.